Hi everyone, it's your boy Simon here. February is kind of like the most dreadful month of the year here in Moscow, so I was staying home and I thought I wanted to share something with you, something that is a very important topic to me and something that I've not seen on the internet much. And I started writing a post on Patreon because this is a place I feel the most comfortable being myself, I guess, and being open because I know literally every person there supports me. It just became such a long post. It just wouldn't fit into text, I guess. So I thought, I suppose I can share it on the internet like a podcast episode or just an audio you could listen to. In case this is something you're interested in or have trouble to comprehend like I do, I did, I used to, I still do. It's gonna be a bit of a ramble because I'm kind of dealing with this as I'm talking about it, and yes, I do need therapy, and this is some kind of therapy for me, I suppose. So the topic, as you probably see from the name of the video, audio, podcast episode, is the name change journey. And it's not just a name change journey, it's also strongly connected to gender identity exploration. I'm gonna be awkward, this is a disclaimer. So, I could never be like binary trans people, I guess, who can say that, hey, I've known all my life. Ever since I was a kid, I played with different toys that weren't assigned to my gender audience, I guess. Like, I was considered to be a girl, but I wanted to play with cars and do sports. And I was assigned male at birth, and I wanted to play with dolls and wear dresses and stuff like that. And this story was never exactly relatable to me. I was born in the 90s in Russia, and most of the clothes we had, most of the toys we had, wasn't blue or pink. It was very diverse. It was mostly yellow and green, from what I remember, and like red. And our parents just dressed us in whatever they could find. Like, we weren't brought up as princesses and princes back in Moscow in the 90s. So I was fine, and I never thought about the fact that I didn't like my name or anything. It was just a name, something you go by, and I never questioned it. My parents chose it for me. I think my sister actually, I have an older sister who is 4 years older, and before I was born, or just a couple days after I was born, I think, she would say, you should call my sibling this way. It was very cute. It was a cute story, and up till the age of 12 or 13, I was completely fine with everything. I didn't have any problems. And then I would say that at the age of 13, I kind of started maybe struggling a little bit more, or maybe just exploring my identity a little bit more and forming some kind of personality that was not exactly conventional, not exactly anything I've seen like represented and stuff like that. And what really helped me to explore my identity was actually cosplay. I would cosplay male characters, and I would use different set of pronouns, and I would call myself either as the name of the character I was cosplaying, or I would call myself by like a cosplay nickname. I had a bunch of different nicknames I had for like my teen blogs and websites I would use to post my cosplay photos on. They were very bad, but I was a teenager. I was like, it was fun and it was freeing, and I could explore how I wanted to dress and what haircuts I wanted to have and whether makeup was for me. I was starting to explore my romantic and sexual orientation as well, because this was the first time I had a crush, like a real crush. The thing that I loved about cosplay community back in the day when in Moscow it was very small and I was a part of it, maybe I was oblivious to some problems back then. But what I loved about it is that however weird I seemed to my parents and the heteronormative and cis-centered society, the community I had, the cosplay community, was so supportive, and it was just accepting without questions. So back then I chose the name for myself, which was Ethan. It came from like a TV series I think I used to watch. It was either I found the character relatable or I found that I looked like the character a little bit, and I just thought, yeah, Ethan is what I'm gonna go with. And the community was okay with this. I was still not the part of the LGBT community because, I don't know, somehow it was never visible in my life, I think. People in the cosplay community were mostly not straight, so this was kind of my community that wasn't necessarily LGBTQI+. It was just like a bunch of different people who were accepting and nice to each other and could explore things. The only thing I would say, of course, that like my parents disapproved of this hobby greatly. They heard the change in the pronouns sometimes when I was talking to my friends. They despised it. They would hate on my friends from that community. They would check my phone. They knew I was changing, and I think it was normal because of my age, but they were honestly the least supportive people from my entire surroundings, from in my environment back in the day. But it was fine. I thought, I'm rebellious, I'm a teenager, whatever. So I didn't really care, I guess, what they wanted to say. I did care deep down, but I wanted them to think that I didn't really care. As time passed, the cosplay community grew, and it became, if a community grows, then the amount of haters grow as well, and the amount of people who are just there to be mean to each other grows. And I was kind of naturally switching from anime to computer games, so I was losing interest in both anime and cosplay, and I was facing reality again. I was distancing myself from a pretty accepting community and pushing myself to get back to reality where all of the traits that I picked up were not acceptable. The name I chose was not acceptable, the pronouns, even my presentation was not exactly acceptable because it was leaning towards the masculine side, even though I called it androgynous back in the day. So I was faced with this dilemma, and I knew I couldn't go back to my passport name that my parents chose for me. During my years in the cosplay community, it became a bit of a punishment. I didn't want to use it, and I didn't want other people to know it. But if by any means someone got to know it somehow, through like some drama or like someone spilling it somewhere, they would use it in a mean way, and they would call you that name out of spite just because they wanted to make you mad. I don't know why people do these things, but this would actually happen to me. And so my hate for my passport name, the name my parents chose for me, it just grew and grew and grew to a point that when I got out of the community, I was faced with this dilemma of not having a name at all. Back in the day, computer games were kind of my shelter, I guess, a safe space. And my favorite computer game at the time was Mass Effect. And the main protagonist of Mass Effect is Commander Shepard, who is somehow translated to Russian as Kapitan Shepard. And so I was playing so much that my friends at school, the ones who were accepting and kind of geeky themselves, calling me Kapitan, and it became my nickname that I decided to use. It felt fine. It was kind of gender neutral because of the game, because all Russian nouns have gender endings, or if you put like an adjective next to a noun, the adjective has to have gendered ending of the gender of the noun. It's really confusing, especially if you're like in English is your native language. I was more or less okay when I was in high school, because those friends I had, they were fine with it, and teachers, I didn't really care about what they thought. I was not close with any of my teachers, and my parents, again, I think they were just super happy that I left the cosplay business behind, and they didn't really care what was happening in my brain. So I left school. I finished school and I started working in a coffee shop because I wanted to take a gap year. And this coffee shop was full of kind of geeky and, I guess, unconventional people as well. So you had to have a badge on your t-shirt when you were making coffee, and I asked them if I could put Capitan on it, and they said yeah, and I was delighted. And I had problems at the coffee shop as well with this, but not as much. I think I was feeling supported enough to just be me and be okay with it. After working for 1 year at a coffee shop, I earned enough to get a camera and go to university to a photography course. There, I struggled again. I had to meet a lot of new people, and I knew that my teachers were going to use my passport name, because this is the name you use when you apply to university. And I guess as a protection mechanism, I would say I would introduce myself with a passport name that I couldn't relate to, so that no one would think that I'm like too weird or dumb for using Capitan, or childish or silly. And it got to a point that I got myself into a trap, because once you introduce yourself in a certain way, it is very hard to make people call you anything else. I was at a point where every time I had to meet a new person, I would want to run away as soon as they would say, "This is my name, what's your name?" Because I didn't have a name I could use. I was trapped. I felt trapped, and I felt confused, and I felt stupid, honestly. I was like, okay, you don't like your passport name, just choose another name. What's the problem? Everyone I know on the internet just chose another name. I knew that one of the things you could do, from my experience from seeing other people choosing other names, was remaking the name you have into either something more gender neutral or masculine or feminine, whatever you feel the need to do. And I tried so hard to remake my name. It's just one of those names that you can't really do anything about, I guess. I was so jealous of middle names that a lot of English-speaking people have. I thought if only I just had one more name to choose from, one more chance, maybe then I would have been, I don't know, I would have had some kind of a way out of this, because my name didn't work. It just didn't work. It made me dysphoric. It made me disassociate myself from when anyone called me by that name. Whenever I had this thought in my mind that, okay, maybe I should try a completely different name, and I would think, not even talk to anyone about it, just think in my mind, okay, how about this name or this name? All I could think about was that I was stealing it from somebody, that I had this guilt that if my parents didn't give me the name, that I wasn't allowed to take any other name. They belonged to someone else. I couldn't just take them. I couldn't just use them. And I guess that comes from the stereotype in this society, in Russian society, that you cannot go against your parents. They know better. You need to respect their choice, regardless of how it makes you feel. If your parents chose that name and they love that name that they chose for you, it's you who is wrong for wanting a different name. They're right, they're never wrong. And I think it's like a very, very, very toxic concept, because parents are just people, like everybody else. So having that stereotype, having that rule stuck in my head all my life, I honestly just felt trapped, and I kept thinking to myself, why is it so hard for me? Why am I so bad at this? Everyone just chooses a name and they keep moving forward. but I just had so much trouble with it. I was like, 21, 22 at that point, and I was still struggling. I honestly felt so stupid. And I was also struggling to find a community again, because I'm okay kind of with being alone, but at the same time I feel like all people just want to connect. And I found this community online. Someone introduced me to a queer community, and it was supposed to be good for like non-binary people as well. And this was the first kind of year when I was starting to grasp what non-binary people are, and started to be like, oh, finally I found the name for me, because I knew I was under the trans umbrella, but I didn't know the exact label I could use for myself, I guess. The queer community was supposed to be accepting of non-binary people, and what it was kind of like a support group, I guess. People would just sit in a circle, talk about their struggles. They were mostly a lot older than I was, and they were talking about real life struggles, like being fired for being trans and for being harassed and stuff like that. It was very heavy, but also they weren't accepting at all whatsoever of non-binary gender. They would just say, just choose one already, choose one of the two. And when I couldn't come up with a name to introduce myself and just said Capitan again, they also couldn't take this or accept it, and they would just say, just choose a name. Stop, like, it's ridiculous, it's childish, stop it. So again, I just felt like I could not possibly be accepted by any people, even the community that was supposed to be mine. And I left it, and then at some point I was reading Zamyatin We. Zamyatin is a Russian author, and We is a dystopian novel. And there, instead of names, characters have a letter and a number, or a bunch of letters and numbers together. And I thought to myself, how delightful would that be? No gender, no associations, just letters and numbers, nothing more. And so I chose a number, and I chose a letter that I liked, and it was 5 and a small lowercase letter O, so 50. And I liked it a lot, and I like how it sounds, and I like how it looks. And if you look at it sideways, it looks like a little guy waving at you. And I thought I could use this as my nickname for my photography work. But again, I couldn't use it for real life. I had this again, that it was not good enough for people. Still, it was ridiculous. Maybe even more so than Capitan or Ethan. And then I came on Tumblr. I stumbled upon the HPRP community on Tumblr. It was really delightful. It was really something. I was in a pretty dark place back then, because all of my friends in real life are cis and heterosexual, and as much as I love them, there are certain things and certain topics that I can't talk to them about, because I'm 100% sure they wouldn't be able to relate or understand. They would accept, but I wouldn't see any understanding in their eyes. And the HPRP community 2 years ago was small, but there was so much of everything. People were queer, and people were ace, and people used different sets of pronouns, and I was like, oh my god, where has this been all my life? I put Capitan 50, as now you know from my name journey, or two things that I felt more or less comfortable with, and then I kind of opened up about not knowing what name to choose, not being able to choose a name for myself, and people started like throwing names at me, being like, oh, I think this would suit you, this would suit you, this would suit you. After talking to Erin for a bunch of months, and like trusting them completely, they said, you know what we can do? You can tell me what kind of name you want to try, and I can try calling you that name, just between us two, not on public, just in WhatsApp, on Snapchat. And if it doesn't feel right, or you can't relate to it at all, then it's okay. I'm just gonna stop doing that, and we can try another name sometime later when you're ready. And so I thought to myself, like, what kind of names did I like during the years, and which ones could stick to me, I guess. And I thought Ethan, Simon, Keith, Simon, Noah, Simon, Eli, let me think, Simon. And so I just thought about this fact that Simon just kept coming back, and I didn't really have any bad associations with it in my mind. The only association I really had with Simon was that my favorite stand-up comedian, Simon Amstel, has this name. Yeah, I've not read any of the books that have Simon as the main character at that point. Not Carry On, not Simon Against the Homo Sapiens Agenda, or whatever its name is. The only association I had was my favorite stand-up comedian. And again, I felt this sting of guilt that I was taking it from him. And I just tried to silence it, I guess, in my brain. I tried to be like, okay, he has this name. He will probably never know I have this name as well if I try it. And even if he does, I don't think he'll be against it. People have the same names and they're okay with it. So I told this all to Erin, and Erin tried it, and it felt weird, but also it felt good. And it's not an easy process getting used to a completely new name, so I didn't expect it to be like to click right away. But after a while, it did make me feel more and more comfortable to use it. And then I thought to myself, yeah, but I am non-binary, you know? I am not male, I am not female, I do not feel inside like a man or a woman. And Simon is generally perceived as a male name in society. And I started to make myself feel bad about this because couldn't I choose a more gender-neutral name? And then I thought about it, and I came to a conclusion that all names can be gender-neutral. Since gender is a social construct, it doesn't matter. We as a society decided that Alex can be used for people who are male and people who are female. Why did we decide this? Who decided this? Who did it? And why can't we do this and apply this rule to every other name in the universe? Why can't we say that Fred is also a male and female name? Why can't we say that, I don't know, Claudia can be used as however you want to use it? It can be gender neutral. I also had this example, from Star Trek Discovery. It's a new Star Trek TV series where the name of the main female protagonist is Michael. And the first second your brain kind of goes, okay, Michael, isn't it a male name? But then the second time they tell you her name, you're already used to this. So it's just a matter of habit, really, of having those examples of names used however you want to use them. The reason we all know Alex is a gender-neutral name is because probably when we were young, we had a friend or someone in our class or in our kindergarten whose name was Alex, and then we met someone else with a different gender or sex or whatever, whose name was also Alex, and we asked our moms or our parents or our dads, and we're like, isn't Alex a boy's name or like a girl's name? And our parents told us, oh no honey, it can be used for anyone. So this is the only reason that this is gender neutral. So I thought to myself, I am non-binary, and that Simon in my specific example is also a non-binary and gender neutral name. And I kind of just let it go. And I thought to myself that no one really needs to follow all these rules. They don't make much sense if you think about them for 2 more seconds, And I guess then we got engaged. And suddenly, not only did I have a name, but I also had a surname. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a conservative person, and I don't think that people who get engaged or married need to have the same surname. But if when me and Erin, we get married, our marriage will not be accepted in Russia. That's just a fact. Gay marriages are not legal in Russia. So when we will go to Russia, because here's where my family is and my friends. When we go to Russia, I still want us to have a sense of family, so that no person who has our documentation or whatever thinks that we're completely not connected to each other. You know what I mean? I just wanted, however conservative the person to be, to accept that we are a family. And after having both a name and a surname for a while, I considered changing my name in my passport. You probably know that it is not an easy process. It's very long and it's expensive, but it is worth it. The decision really didn't come very easy to me. I had all those thoughts in my head, like the fact that I'm gonna have an English name while living in Russia. You see, Russian society is very judgmental, very judgmental. Everyone thinks it's their business. And I knew I was gonna get looks for just having this name. I knew I was already weird to them, the way I present, my style, the way I talk, I guess. And I would just add to the pile that makes me unacceptable or ridiculous. A part of me just wanted to stay convenient. It's very hard to always be confrontational to the world around you. It's very exhausting, and a part of me just wanted people not to have this moment of judgment as soon as they hear my name or see my card, my credit card. It's hard to talk about it because I know that to some people this will sound stupid, I guess. To a lot of people it would sound like, what's the big deal, dude? Just choose a name. Why is this so hard? Stop caring what other people think and just start living your life like you want to. You can choose whatever the fuck you want and just roll with it. And I wish it was this easy. Boy, do I wish it was this easy. But there are so many things that are so much more problematic and intricate, and it's just hard. My parents, I did not tell my parents that I changed the name. My parents will never accept this. My mother will cry if she gets to know this, and she will eventually understand that. And I know why they're this way, and I can't change them, and I've accepted this. They were born in a different time, they were born in a completely different society in USSR, and I understand that. But choosing to change my name for me and not for anyone else is a big fucking step. I started swearing more because I'm emotional. So the actual process, I guess it's gonna be maybe the shortest part of this whole name journey. I thought it would be the hardest part, but it wasn't. After I made the decision, me and my sister went to the place where they change your name, with all the documents, with all the fees paid. We went in expecting that it will take about a month for them to make a decision. And I had a problem because Russian people have a patronymic name. So you have your first name, surname, and a patronymic name. And a patronymic name is made by taking your father's name and adding your gendered ending to it. So of course, being non-binary, I didn't want any gendered ending. So I just choose my 5-0 name instead of a patronymic name. So basically, I told them that I don't want it to be made by the rules of Russian language. And I thought it was going to be a big problem, and I read a bunch of articles where this was not allowed. And I was ready to fight. I was so nervous when we went, but it went super smoothly, and the lady actually made a decision and gave me a name change certificate right away. It was such a out-of-the-body experience to have this certificate in your hands and know that now you can change any documentation that you have and be Simon, officially Simon. It was a big deal. It happened in December, so I'm still kind of, But then of course this wasn't the end of it, and I spent 2 months changing all the rest of the documents. And I was always expecting the government employees, the people who work in document centers, to be the most conservative and the most judgmental towards me when I was applying for like those document changes. But in fact, they were fine. They didn't really care. I feel like the problems I faced more were with the bank when I was changing my credit cards. And just in general in life, I guess I understood while doing this that I would face judgment. But you can't really be absolutely prepared for every situations because they happen unexpectedly. One of the times that it hit me pretty hard was when one of my clients, and I write out like a payment document for them, said, "Oh, you changed your what Simon? Why does the document say Simon?" And said, "Oh, I changed my name, don't worry about it. I changed all the documents that I have for my work, so no worries." And he said, "Oh, okay, I'm very curious. Can you explain to me why?" And I decided to be brave and stand my ground and be very decisive and be like, this is what I believe in, and I wanted to change my name for a while, so I did it. It's not a big deal, don't worry about it. And he said, I understand. And then he said, I think I'm just going to use the old name still. So I guess it's just, and it's baffling if people know your reasoning, if they say they understand, but then they say that they're just going to do what's convenient for them. They understand that it was a struggle for you, but they choose to put themselves above you and above your reasoning and above your struggles, you know. And one of the other situations that really caught me off guard was as a photographer, I sometimes need tech that I do not own, so I go to a rental place and I rent it out. And to rent anything that is tech that is pretty expensive, you need to provide your documentation because otherwise you could just steal it. And I understand that. And I changed all my documentations on the website and I kind of explained the situation there. And then I went in completely sure that they got all this information and it was going to be fine. I come in, they still call me by my dead name. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. And I explain, yes, I changed my name. I provided all the documentation for you. Person who's talking to me, he says, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. He was like, I'm curious, kind of, are you like moving or something? And I was like, yeah, and we just joked around a little bit and it was fine. And I was so delighted. I thought, hey, he didn't seem to mind that I changed my name, and he was very accepting of it, and that was nice. I was really happy with this interaction because I was expecting the worst. And then as soon as I stepped out, I was walking around the shop, and I guess they didn't see me walk around because the shop is pretty big, and I was looking at other lenses. I heard laughter from that counter, and I heard that people were talking about my name change and being like, used to be this, but it's now this, like how ridiculous, like why is this name such a weird name? And they were laughing their asses off. And of course I didn't like confront them or go up there, but it threw me off. It's fine, and it's a part of the process, but it does what I wanted to say, I guess, in this podcast, in this audio thingy, is that it has its pros and it has its cons, and you have to, if you feel like me, you have to think about this on a bigger scale. In this year, it will be hard. This year, it will be tough, and I will have troubles, and I will have this moment of like bullying and misunderstandings and judgments. But if I think about it on a scale of 10 years in the future, I'm gonna live as myself. I'm gonna live under the name that makes me comfortable, that makes me me, and this means a lot. This is the first time since I was 12 years old, so it's been 12 years since then, that I feel like I'm officially myself. And I'm still gonna struggle with our other identity problems and dysphoria and all that kind of stuff, and pronouns, and people misgendering me, and just lots and lots of stuff. But even just having this name is like an anchor. So I guess I just wanted to be open about this process. And if you have any like questions, you can leave them in the comments or anywhere else, and I'll try to answer them, because I think it just took me so long that I feel like if anyone can get any kind of help or support from this, then I'm only happy to do it, because I myself was really struggling. And that's about it for this podcast, whatever this is. I'm tired. I'm honestly exhausted. Being vulnerable is exhausting. So I'm gonna go grab a tea and look at my new passport again, I guess. Bye bye. Thank you for listening.